What if the future King of England just erased his own brother from royal history? That's not a tabloid question. It's the whisper echoing through palace corridors tonight. After years of tension, betrayal, and emotional warfare between the two brothers once called the heirs and the spare, Prince William has done something so final, so unprecedented, that even seasoned royal insiders are calling it the second abdication. Only this time, it's not a king stepping down. It's a brother being erased. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine the weight of that. The crown doesn't just cut, it severs. And this cut may never heal. Reports are now flooding in from multiple palace sources claiming that Prince William has officially signed off on a royal directive that permanently removes Prince Harry and Meghan Markle from every remaining trace of royal privilege, honorary titles, patronages, security funding, even symbolic associations tied to the monarchy's name. It's not suspension. It's not temporary. It's erasure. But why now? Why after all these years of silence and moving forward? Why would William, the man groomed since birth to embody restraint, suddenly pull the ultimate trigger against his own brother? To understand this move, we have to go back to the beginning of the storm, to the fractures that widened with every interview, every headline, every awkward photograph, where two brothers who once laughed together couldn't even look each other in the eye. But before we dive deep, let's pause on one chilling detail. This decision wasn't made in the public eye. It wasn't announced by Buckingham Palace's media office. It was sealed in private, under the royal insignia, inside Kensington Palace, at midnight. No cameras, no leaks, no ceremony. Only a handful of witnesses and a single royal pen that, in seconds, altered the course of royal history. The ripple effect was immediate. Insiders describe Harry's reaction as utter disbelief. Meghan's, they say, was explosive. The news hit their California home like a thunderclap in the middle of a clear blue sky. They thought they were already free. Yet, in a cruel twist of irony, it turns out they were still tethered by invisible royal strings. And with one stroke of William's pen, those strings were cut for good. Here's the irony, though. Years ago, it was Harry and Meghan who said they wanted to step back. They said they wanted independence, freedom, privacy. Yet today, stripped of royal privilege entirely, that dream has turned into a nightmare. Because without royal ties, they're not royals. And that loss of identity, prestige, and heritage is something no money or Hollywood connection can truly replace. And it all circles back to one man, Prince William. The very person Harry once called his rock during their mother's passing. The one who promised they'd always have each other's backs. The one who stood beside him through grief, through global tours, through Diana's funeral when the world watched two small boys walk behind their mother's coffin. That brother is now the man who signed the papers that ended Harry's royal existence. So what happened between them? Some claim it began with Meghan. Others say it started much earlier, buried deep in the brothers' rivalry over duty, destiny, and resentment. After all, one was always the future king. The other, merely the backup plan. The heir and the spare. A label so cruelly definitive that even Harry named his memoir after it. But tonight, it feels like that label became prophecy. Because now, the heir has officially erased the spare. Palace aides described the atmosphere leading up to the decision as cold, clinical, and calculated. There were no heated arguments, no shouting, no scenes of family drama, just paperwork, silence, and a sense of inevitability, as though the crown itself demanded this purge to survive the next chapter of monarchy. You see, this wasn't just about family anymore. It was about image, control, survival. The monarchy is in transition. King Charles's health has become a growing concern behind palace walls. Public support for the royal institution has been eroding, especially among younger generations. Scandals, controversies, and online backlash have made the monarchy look outdated, fractured, even hypocritical. And at the center of that perception, Harry and Meghan, the runaway royals turned celebrity activists. Their every move, whether it's a Netflix documentary, a podcast, or a red carpet appearance, feeds a media machine that thrives on drama between the Sussexes and the firm. To the public, it's entertainment. To the monarchy, it's corrosion. And so, William, perhaps seeing himself as the guardian of the next generation, made the call. The monarchy must survive, even if the family doesn't. But how far did he go? Sources suggest the new royal order extends beyond stripping titles. It includes a clause that prevents future reinstatement. In other words, Harry's children, Archie and Lilibet, may never inherit or reclaim royal patronages, regardless of future reconciliations. The door has not just been closed, it's been locked, bolted, and sealed with wax. What's more chilling is the timing. The order was reportedly finalized shortly after a tense family meeting following the king's recent health episode. Insiders claim William pushed for clarity in royal succession and representation, arguing that ambiguity breeds chaos. Translation: he wanted Harry and Meghan formally and legally detached from anything that might blur the royal image moving forward. Now imagine being in Harry's shoes, watching from thousands of miles away as your brother signs the papers that erase your legacy. Imagine the mixture of rage, confusion, and heartbreak. How do you even process that? How do you pick up the phone and call him after that? And Meghan, how do you stand by your husband, knowing that the institution you fought against has now made your exile official? Reports say she stormed out of their Montecito home after receiving the news. Others claim she was determined to retaliate, possibly through a new media project designed to reclaim their narrative. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. This decision didn't just cut ties. It reignited a war. And here's the contradiction that makes it even more tragic. William reportedly didn't do it out of hatred. Those close to him insist it was duty, pure and simple. The same duty drilled into him since childhood, the crown above all else. Even above blood. He's been preparing for this since the day he was born. Every decision weighed, every emotion suppressed, every move calculated to serve the institution. But even kings in waiting have breaking points. And perhaps this was his. Because think about it. How long can you watch your family name dragged through documentaries and tell-alls before something inside you snaps? How long can you hold back when every interview from across the Atlantic feels like a personal attack? So William, the peacemaker, the calm one, finally became the enforcer. And what's even more haunting? According to one insider, the moment he signed the order, he said just 3 words: "It's done now." Cold, final, almost surgical. Those words echo like a ghost through the palace halls, a reminder that even royals bleed when loyalty meets power. The fallout is massive. Reporters camped outside Buckingham Palace describe unusual security movements, late-night car arrivals, and closed-door briefings. Palace staff are on media lockdown, instructed not to comment. Every royal spokesperson has gone silent. And that silence, in royal circles, is louder than any statement. But make no mistake, this isn't just about Harry and Meghan losing royal perks. This is about rewriting the royal family's narrative for the future. By severing them officially, William is protecting the monarchy's brand. No more blurred lines. No more confusion about who represents the crown and who doesn't. It's ruthless, but in the royal world, ruthlessness is often rebranded as leadership. And so we're left with a question that cuts deeper than any title or privilege. Is William protecting the institution or destroying what's left of his family to save it? Because behind that polished image of composure lies a man torn between duty and blood. The same internal battle that destroyed generations before him. Charles and Diana, the Queen and her sister Margaret. Even the abdication crisis of Edward VIII versus duty to the throne. History repeats, doesn't it? And now, the same story unfolds in modern times, streamed, tweeted, dissected, and replayed for millions of viewers across the world. But beneath all the media noise, there's something hauntingly simple about it. A brother betrayed by another brother. Harry once said, "We were on different paths." He didn't know how prophetic that line would become. Because today, those paths have diverged so far that they may never cross again. And yet, as William prepares to ascend one day as king, he must live with the knowledge that his first act of power wasn't a unifying one. It was an excommunication. Was it worth it? Was this the price of duty? Or did the crown just claim another victim in its endless cycle of sacrifice? As the palace gates remain closed and the world speculates, one thing's for sure. This isn't the end of the story. It's only the beginning of a royal reckoning that will redefine loyalty, power, and love for generations to come. Because while William may have signed the order in silence, The echo of that pen stroke will be heard around the world. But what William did next, behind the palace walls and away from the cameras, would ignite a chain reaction that no one, not even the monarchy itself, could stop. And that's where our story truly begins. It wasn't announced to the public. It wasn't posted on the royal family's website. There was no televised address, no smiling photo of handshakes and pearls. It was midnight at Kensington Palace, quiet, dimly lit, and colder than usual. And that's when it happened. The royal order that would forever change the course of two brothers' lives was signed in silence. Not even the king was in the room. Imagine it, the ticking of the antique clock, the faint hum of the rain outside, and a long oak table covered with papers, folders, and sealed envelopes marked confidential. At the center sat William, head down, pen poised, surrounded by two senior advisors who looked more like witnesses than assistants. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Everyone in that room already understood the gravity of what was about to happen. William didn't rush. He never does. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, almost ceremonial. He flipped through the final draft of the royal directive, his expression unreadable. This wasn't a moment of anger. It wasn't revenge. It was duty, sharpened into something surgical. The document itself was deceptively simple. One page, a few paragraphs of formal language. But those few paragraphs carried the weight of generations. It stated, in crisp legal terms, that Prince Henry Charles Albert David, Duke of Sussex, and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, were to be formally relieved of all remaining royal patronages, privileges, and honorary associations effective immediately. No gray area. No path for reinstatement. Just an ending. As William's signature met the page, one advisor reportedly swallowed hard. The other didn't move. The silence stretched so long it was almost painful. And then William capped the pen, set it down, and said quietly, "It's done." 3 words. That's all it took to draw a line between two brothers who once stood shoulder to shoulder at their mother's grave. But why in secret? Why not involve the king, or at least the Privy Council? The answer lies in the fine print of royal governance, details the public rarely sees. The monarch delegates certain powers of administration to the Prince of Wales, particularly concerning the allocation and maintenance of royal patronages. In simple terms, William had the authority to make this move, and he didn't need anyone's permission to do it. Still, that doesn't explain the timing. Why that night? Why the rush? Sources inside Kensington say it wasn't planned for that day. It was forced. Hours earlier, William allegedly received a briefing from senior aides about an upcoming media project Harry and Meghan were reportedly developing, one that insiders feared would reopen old wounds between the brothers and potentially depict palace life in an unflattering light. One source claimed William's reaction was chillingly calm. He listened, nodded, and simply said, "Then it's time." That was it. No debate, no hesitation. Just a quiet decision that carried decades of emotional exhaustion behind it. But while the ink dried in London, 5,000 miles away in Montecito, California, Harry and Meghan were completely unaware that their royal identities were about to be erased. It's poetic in a tragic way, isn't it? For years, Harry fought to carve out his own life beyond the palace's shadow. He claimed freedom. He said goodbye to royal duties. Yet deep down, perhaps a part of him still believed that one day reconciliation was possible. That maybe, just maybe, the brothers could rebuild what had been broken. That illusion shattered the moment William signed that paper. According to palace staff, the order wasn't stored in the usual royal archives. It was hand-delivered to a private royal courier who left Kensington at exactly 12:47 a.m. The destination? Clarence House, the administrative headquarters for King Charles. But not even Charles was informed until the following morning. That silence speaks volumes. This wasn't William acting as a son. It was William acting as a future king. Let's take a moment to imagine the weight he carried in that instant. For most people, cutting off a sibling might mean blocking a number, ignoring a text. But for William, it meant ending centuries of royal precedent, the idea that bloodline alone guarantees privilege. This decision will be studied by historians one day, not just for what it did, but for what it symbolized: the monarchy's evolution from family to corporation, from heart to institution. But inside that midnight meeting, there were hints of hesitation, tiny cracks in William's steel composure. One aide, speaking under anonymity, recalled seeing him pause before signing, staring at the family crest embossed on the top of the document. It was like he was seeing his whole life reflected back at him, the aide said. His mother, his brother, the press, the chaos, all of it. And yet, he signed anyway. Because in the royal world, emotion is a luxury. Duty is oxygen. The meeting ended in under 20 minutes. No toasts. No acknowledgments. William reportedly left the room without saying another word. He walked down the long corridor of Kensington Palace, past portraits of ancestors who had made their own ruthless decisions in the name of the crown, past paintings of his grandmother, his father, even one of Diana, whose eyes, in that portrait, seemed to follow him. Did he hesitate? Did he wonder what she would have thought? Or had he already convinced himself she'd understand? Maybe he did, because Diana, too, was once stripped of her titles after defying the institution. Perhaps, in some painful twist of irony, William believed he was finishing what history had started, a purging of everything that threatened the monarchy's survival. But here's the haunting contradiction. The man enforcing the monarchy's rules is the same man raised by a mother who rebelled against them. And as he reached the end of that hallway, the symbolism couldn't have been clearer. Behind him lay tradition. Ahead of him, silence. Outside, the rain continued to fall, a quiet, relentless downpour. In British lore, rain has always symbolized renewal, cleansing. But that night, it felt more like mourning. Meanwhile, a lone security guard stationed at the palace gate later told a tabloid that the prince left shortly after midnight, his car headlights cutting through the wet London streets. He looked tired, the guard said, like he'd been carrying the world on his shoulders. Of course, by the next morning, word began to leak. A whisper to one journalist. A cryptic post from a royal watcher on X. Within hours, headlines began popping up. Prince of Wales issues quiet decree against Sussexes. The palace refused to comment. That silence, strategic, deliberate, only fueled speculation. By noon, TV pundits and royal experts were scrambling to confirm details. Was it true? Was William really behind it? Or was this another palace rumor blown out of proportion? And that's when a single anonymous source dropped the quote that confirmed it all. Yes. He signed it himself. Alone. The internet exploded. Supporters called it long overdue. Critics called it cold-blooded. And royal historians called it unprecedented in modern times. But no one, not even the most cynical commentator, could ignore the human element. The pain of two brothers raised under unimaginable pressure, one destined to rule, the other desperate to escape. In Montecito, Harry reportedly got the call just hours later. A mutual friend, not the palace, broke the news. Meghan was in the kitchen when she overheard, and according to a close acquaintance, her immediate reaction was disbelief. He wouldn't dare. But he did. That call will become its own story, a moment of emotional implosion we'll explore in the next chapter. But for now, picture the silence that followed the news. Picture Harry holding his phone, staring at it, knowing his brother had just closed the door on him forever. Because once that signature hit paper, there was no turning back. And that's what makes this so tragic. It wasn't the work of a faceless institution. It was the decision of a man who once promised his brother they'd face the world together. Now, that promise lies buried under ink and protocol. And yet, deep down, something tells me William didn't sleep that night. Duty might have won, but peace didn't. Because the next morning, as sunlight broke through the gray London sky, the world would wake up to the shock of a headline no one expected. Prince William ends all royal privileges for Harry and Meghan. But as the public reeled, as reporters scrambled and royal aides locked down communication, one unanswered question hung in the air like a storm about to break. Who told Harry first? And what did he say when he finally realized his brother had erased him from royal life forever? Because that phone call, what was said, and who made it, would set off an emotional explosion inside the Sussex home that would change everything. And that's where we're heading next. Because when Harry picked up that call, it wasn't the palace on the other end. It was someone else. And what they said shattered him completely. Harry's phone started ringing just past dawn. He was sitting by the large glass window of his Montecito home, staring blankly at the California sunrise, half awake, coffee untouched. The phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times before he even glanced at it. The name on the screen froze him. It wasn't his father. It wasn't William. It was someone from inside the palace, a friend, but also a messenger. The kind of call that starts softly but ends with your world collapsing. "Harry, are you sitting down?" That's how the conversation began. According to an insider close to the Sussex Circle, there was hesitation in the voice. That dreadful pause before the truth drops. Harry had heard it before, when the palace informed him of his mother's death. That same emptiness. That same breathless anticipation. "What is it?" he asked. There was a silence. Then 6 words that would shatter him completely. "William signed the order last night." For a second, Harry didn't understand. He blinked, half smiled in disbelief. "What order?" "The royal directive," the voice continued. "It's done. You've been stripped of all remaining privileges. It's official." And just like that, the air left the room. Harry stood up, pacing. "You're joking," he said, his tone sharp, defensive, desperate. "There's no way he'd do that. Not without telling me. Not William." But he did. And the words echoed like gunfire. "Not William. Not William." Because that's what made it unbearable. Not the loss of titles, not the loss of status, but the realization that his brother, the one person who should have fought for him, was the one who'd signed him out of history. Imagine the feeling, being told that your own bloodline just exiled you. Harry reportedly walked to the backyard, phone in hand, his voice shaking. He kept repeating he wouldn't do this, like someone trying to wake up from a nightmare. Meghan followed him out, still in her robe, confused. "What's wrong?" she asked. Harry turned, his eyes red, his voice cracking. "He's done it, Meg. He's actually done it." At first, she thought he meant something else, an argument, a leaked story. But when she realized the gravity, her expression changed instantly. Her calm dissolved. "What do you mean he's done it?" she asked, grabbing the phone. The friend on the other end hesitated. "The order's been signed. It's being distributed internally today. All patronages, associations, everything. You and Harry are no longer connected to the royal household in any form. It's final." The word final landed like a bomb. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Harry had left the royal life to find freedom, not exile. He had imagined a halfway world, one where he could live in peace, raise his family, yet still keep the bond with his heritage intact. But now, that bridge had been burned. Not by tabloids, not by the institution, by William. And something inside him broke. He reportedly threw his phone across the grass, shouting, "He's just like them." A reference insiders believe was aimed at the monarchy, at the system, maybe even at their father. Meghan tried to calm him, but he was inconsolable. After everything we went through," he said. "He didn't even call me." Can you imagine that betrayal? Years of brotherhood, laughter, and loyalty, all erased with a signature. It's almost Shakespearean, isn't it? 2 princes born under the same crown, divided by destiny and destroyed by duty. But here's what most people don't know. Harry had sensed something was coming. Days before the order was signed, he had reached out to an intermediary in the palace, an old friend, to ask about rumors of administrative adjustments. He was told not to worry. "It's just paperwork," they said. "Nothing you need to concern yourself with." Now that same paperwork had ended his royal life. Back in Montecito, the couple's household staff recalled an eerie silence after the call. Meghan went inside, called her mother Doria, and reportedly said, "It's over." Harry, meanwhile, sat outside for hours, barely moving. Neighbors described seeing him walk the grounds alone that morning, baseball cap pulled low, hands in pockets. One witness told a local reporter, he looked lost, like he didn't know where to go next. And maybe that's because, for the first time in his life, there was nowhere to go. He couldn't call the palace, they wouldn't answer. He couldn't call his father. Charles had reportedly been advised to remain neutral. And William? Well, the silence from Kensington was louder than any words. So he called someone else, an old friend from the army, a man who'd seen him through Afghanistan, through grief, through panic. "I don't know what to do," Harry said, voice trembling. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Think about that line. I don't even know who I am anymore. This wasn't about losing a title. It was about losing identity, belonging, home. The monarchy had shaped him, hurt him, defined him. And now it had erased him. And then came the cruelest twist of all, when Meghan, trying to bring clarity to the chaos, said something that stopped him cold. Maybe this is what they always wanted. That hit him harder than the news itself. because deep down, he knew she might be right. From the day they left, whispers inside the palace described Harry and Meghan as a liability. Their interviews, their public criticism, their growing Hollywood connections, all seen as threats to the monarchy's image. But Harry always believed William would draw the line before it went this far. He was wrong, and the public would soon learn that William's act wasn't impulsive. It had been building for months. Quietly, strategically, relentlessly. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of the story and began their feeding frenzy. Headlines screamed, "William erases Harry. Royal rift now permanent. End of the Sussex era." Every outlet had a different version of events, each more dramatic than the last. But what no one captured was the human side. The grief, the betrayal, the sense of finality that settled over Montecito like fog. Friends say Harry barely spoke for the rest of the day. He didn't answer texts, didn't eat, didn't even turn on the news. Meghan, ever the strategist, was the first to move. "We need to get ahead of this," she reportedly said. "We can't let them control the story." But Harry wasn't thinking about statements or spin. He was thinking about the last conversation he'd had with William, the 1 month earlier, after their father's diagnosis. They had spoken briefly, cordially. For a moment, it almost felt like the old days. "We'll talk soon," William had said before hanging up. "I promise." Now that promise meant nothing. The call that morning in Montecito marked more than a breaking point. It marked a realization. Harry wasn't just losing his titles. He was losing his brother forever. And perhaps, somewhere in London, William knew it too. Because according to one Kensington aide, hours after signing the order, William reportedly stood by his study window, watching the rain streak down the glass. He looked sad, the aide said. Not relieved. Not triumphant. Just sad. Maybe he'd expected to feel lighter after making the decision. Instead, he felt hollow. But here's where things take a twist. That same evening, while Harry and Meghan were processing the shock, William made one more call. Not to his father. Not to Kate. To someone else entirely. And that call would spark a chain reaction that not even the palace could contain. Because the person on the other end of that line wasn't a royal aide or an official. It was someone far more personal. And the message William delivered would change everything. Again. When the news broke, the world gasped. But inside Kensington Palace, William didn't flinch. He was prepared for the backlash. He had already accepted that he would be painted as the villain, the cold, calculating brother who cut off family for the sake of the crown. And yet, in his mind, there was no other way. When duty calls, he reportedly told an aide that morning, "You don't hesitate. You execute." It sounds ruthless, doesn't it? But that's how William has been trained to think his entire life. Not as a brother, not as a son, but as a future king. And that morning, as headlines swirled and social media erupted in outrage, he stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his tie, his reflection almost expressionless. Behind the stiff posture, though, was a man fighting himself, duty on one side, blood on the other. One aide described it perfectly. He looked like a man who'd buried his heart for the sake of his crown. Because for William, this wasn't about revenge. It was about control. About putting the monarchy back on stable ground after years of chaos, leaks, and scandals. The Sussex saga had spiraled far beyond family drama. It had become a global spectacle. Every interview, every accusation, every Netflix teaser dragged the royal brand through the mud. And for William, that brand wasn't just PR. It was the monarchy's survival. Behind closed doors, he'd been warned repeatedly. The royal family's reputation was bleeding. Donors were pulling away. Charities were confused about allegiances. Even foreign governments were quietly questioning whether the monarchy could sustain its image of unity. One senior advisor reportedly told him, "You can't serve two crowns, William. You're either the brother or the king in waiting." And that line haunted him, because in that moment, he realized he couldn't be both. So he chose. Cold. Maybe. But in his mind, necessary. Let's rewind for a moment. Months before the order was signed, there had been internal discussions between William's private secretary and several senior royal advisors about future-proofing the monarchy. The plan? Streamline the royal image, focusing only on those who actively represent the institution. No half-in, half-out players. No blurred lines. The phrase, "no ambiguity," became the quiet mantra inside the palace. And if that sounds familiar, It's because it echoes a conversation the late Queen once had with both Harry and Meghan during the Sandringham Summit in 2020. Her Majesty made it clear then, "You are either in or out." William took that lesson to heart. So when he finally took the throne's future into his own hands, it wasn't an act of betrayal. It was an act of preservation. At least, that's what he told himself. Someone had to clean up the mess, he reportedly said in a private meeting. It's my responsibility now. But beneath that polished sense of responsibility was a storm. Because while he played the role of the decisive leader, inside he was still the little boy who once looked up to his younger brother, the same boy who walked behind their mother's coffin, holding Harry's hand, whispering, "I've got you." Now, he was the man who took everything from him. One palace insider described it this way: William compartmentalizes. He can feel deeply and act decisively at the same time. It's what makes him powerful, but it's also what isolates him. Power and isolation, the two pillars of royal life. And yet, despite all his composure, there were cracks. After the order was signed, he reportedly spent nearly an hour alone in his study. No aides, no calls, just silence. At one point, a housekeeper entered to find him staring at an old framed photo on the shelf, a candid shot of him and Harry laughing during a polo match years ago. He didn't say a word. He just looked at it, then turned it face down. That moment says everything, doesn't it? But the public would never see that side of William. To the outside world, he was composed, decisive, almost indifferent. When reporters shouted questions at him during a charity appearance 2 days later, "Your Royal Highness, is it true you've cut off your brother?" he simply smiled tightly and said, "The work continues." 5 words that told the world exactly who he'd become. The man who keeps moving, no matter who falls behind. And yet, behind that calm exterior, whispers were spreading through the palace corridors. Senior staffers were divided. Some praised him for his leadership. Others questioned whether he'd gone too far. One veteran courtier said quietly to a colleague, "He's becoming more like his father than he realizes." That remark wasn't meant as a compliment, because the comparison to King Charles struck a nerve. William had spent years trying not to repeat his father's mistakes. Emotional distance, cold pragmatism, the prioritization of image over intimacy. And yet, here he was, making the same choice. Cold, calculated, correct, perhaps, but at what cost? Even Catherine noticed the toll. That evening, she reportedly approached him in their private quarters and said, "You've done what you had to do, but you can still talk to him." William didn't respond right away. He just stared out the window, his voice low when he finally spoke. He won't want to talk. Not anymore. That single sentence says it all. Resignation. Guilt. Certainty. He knew the bridge was gone. But for William, there was one moment that finally justified it all in his mind. A senior official had briefed him earlier that week that a new documentary project, allegedly involving the Sussexes, would portray the monarchy as archaic and manipulative. Even if exaggerated, it was enough to push William past the point of patience. "How can I protect this family?" he said, "if my own brother keeps tearing it apart?" That was his rationale, the justification that allowed him to sign that document without trembling. It's not that he stopped caring. It's that he stopped believing reconciliation was possible. And maybe that's the saddest part. Because in his quest to save the monarchy, William lost the one person who truly understood the burden of growing up inside it. Still, he stood by his choice. He told those close to him that the monarchy cannot afford to be sentimental. The institution, he believed, must stand taller than emotion, family, or forgiveness. To many, that sounded like royal stoicism. But to those who knew him best, it sounded like heartbreak disguised as leadership. And yet, despite the criticism, William's move had an immediate effect. Within 48 hours, royal donors reaffirmed commitments. Key allies in Parliament praised his decisiveness. Even some tabloids, normally critical of the royals, applauded the clarity. In the court of public image, William had won. But behind palace gates, the victory felt hollow. Because that same night, a letter arrived at Kensington Palace. No signature, no royal seal, just Harry's handwriting on the envelope. It wasn't long, barely a few sentences. But the message inside was heavy with pain. "You didn't just cut me off, you cut out the only piece of family that still saw you as a brother, not a crown." William read it in silence, then folded it carefully, slid it into a drawer, and never mentioned it again. Because what could he say? That he was sorry? That he didn't mean it? That would be a lie. Because deep down, William did mean it. He believed he was doing what had to be done. But the cost of that belief was higher than he ever imagined. And as the days passed, his decision would begin to backfire. Not publicly, but personally. Because just when William thought he'd contained the storm, one person inside the palace was about to make a move that would expose everything. Someone who knew the truth about how that decision came to be, and why the king himself had quietly approved it all along. And when that revelation came out, it would shake the monarchy to its very core. It started with silence. The kind of silence that fills a room right before a storm hits. Meghan stood in the kitchen, barefoot, holding her phone like it was burning her hand. The words from the palace insider still echoed in her head. It's final. There's no going back. She didn't move, didn't blink. For nearly a full minute, she just stared at the screen, her reflection caught in the black glass. Part disbelief, part fury, part heartbreak. And then, like a sudden spark, it hit her. He did this, she whispered. William actually did this. Harry, sitting at the counter, didn't answer. He was exhausted, his eyes red, his face pale, his coffee cold. He didn't even look up. He just muttered, he's the future king. He can do whatever he wants now. That's when something inside Meghan snapped. No, she said sharply. No, he doesn't get to destroy us quietly. Not again. Her voice rose, trembling not from weakness but from rage, the kind of rage that comes when you've been humiliated one too many times. Because for Meghan, this wasn't just about losing titles or privileges. This was personal. The royal family had taken her dignity once before, stripping her of trust, leaking stories, painting her as the villain. But this time it was worse. This time, they were erasing her from history altogether. And the man behind it wasn't some distant courtier or stiff old monarch. It was William, the same man who had once smiled at her wedding, the same man who had hugged her and whispered, "Welcome to the family." Now, he was the one slamming the door shut. She warned him, said a close friend. She told Harry years ago, "They'll never forgive us for leaving." But Harry didn't want to believe her. Now he had no choice. Meghan turned to Harry, pacing the floor like a storm trapped in a glass box. "Do you see now? Do you see what they're doing? They'll keep cutting us off piece by piece until there's nothing left." Harry didn't answer. His silence only enraged her more. "Say something," she snapped. "Say something, Harry." Finally, he looked up, voice hoarse. "What do you want me to say? That my brother hates me? That I've lost everything? You think I don't already know that?" The words cut through the room like a blade. For a moment, neither spoke. The air was thick with pain and accusation. Two people united by love, but divided by the fallout of a war they never truly escaped. Then, in classic Meghan fashion, she straightened her back, wiped her eyes, and took control. "Fine," she said coldly. "If they want to write the story without us, then we'll write our own." And that's when the rage turned into strategy. Within hours, Meghan was on her phone, calling her team, her publicist, her producer. Plans began forming. Statements drafted. Schedules rearranged. A narrative response, one insider called it. But it wasn't just PR. It was war. One of her longtime friends told a reporter later, Meghan was furious, but she was also focused. She said, "They can strip us of titles, but not our voices." And that single line became her mission. Still, those close to her say the anger ran deeper than anyone realized. She reportedly threw her phone at one point, shattering a glass vase nearby. "They think they can silence me," she shouted. "They don't know who they're dealing with." Her rage wasn't just about control, it was about betrayal. She had believed, or at least hoped, that William would never go this far. That family, even royal family, had limits. But now, the illusion of reconciliation was gone. And when you take away Meghan's hope, you're left with something far more dangerous: determination. That evening, she sat alone in her office, scrolling through old photos, wedding images, baby pictures, royal events. Images of her curtsying, smiling, performing the role she was once praised for, before everything turned sour. Each photo was a reminder of the life she'd been forced to leave, and the respect she was now being denied. Then, she found a picture that stopped her cold. It was one taken during the Commonwealth service, back in 2020. The last royal engagement before Megxit. William and Kate sat in the front row, Harry and Meghan behind them. Meghan remembered the tension that day, the icy glances, the forced smiles. She zoomed in on William's face. The coldness in his expression back then now made perfect sense. He's been planning this for years, she muttered under her breath. Maybe she was right. Maybe not. But in her mind, it didn't matter. Perception was power, and she was about to use it. That night, she began drafting what insiders later described as a personal manifesto, a statement that would both defend and redefine her image. Every sentence was measured, every word calculated. Not rage, but precision. The monarchy is built on silence, one line read. But silence has never protected the truth. That was Meghan at her sharpest, graceful, articulate, and dangerous when cornered. But even as she worked, there were cracks in her composure. She stopped more than once, tears welling up. The pain wasn't just professional, it was personal. Because for all the strength she projected, Meghan had believed, deep down, that the rift between Harry and William could one day heal. She had hoped that her children would know their cousins, that one day she and Kate could at least coexist peacefully. That hope was gone now. And when hope dies, something colder takes its place. In London, meanwhile, the palace was already bracing for impact. Senior aides had been warned that Meghan might retaliate publicly. One insider told The Times, "They've learned to expect the unexpected with her." But this time, even the palace underestimated her. Because Meghan didn't just plan to issue a statement. She wanted a global moment. A friend close to her team said she began exploring options for a new sit-down interview. Something big, televised, emotional. A truth-telling event to reclaim her narrative once and for all. And when asked if she'd include details about William's decision, she allegedly replied, "Every detail that matters." At that moment, Meghan wasn't just reacting. She was reclaiming power. But the emotional toll on her marriage was immediate. Harry, caught between heartbreak and loyalty, grew distant. Friends noticed the tension, two people grieving in different ways. Harry wanted peace. Meghan wanted justice. "Don't you understand?" she told him one night. "If we stay quiet, they win. If we speak, we take back control." But control was slipping faster than either realized. Because across the ocean, in London, the palace wasn't planning to stay silent forever. William, advised by his communications team, had begun preparing his own quiet counter-strategy. He wouldn't respond directly to Meghan, but he would allow selective briefings to shape the public perception, subtle leaks to trusted journalists. Carefully placed phrases like, "The prince acted in the monarchy's best interest," and "Harry and Meghan were informed in advance." Damage control, royal style. The chessboard was set. Meghan on one side, William on the other. And between them, the fragile bond of two brothers dangling by a thread. But as the storm brewed, Meghan received a message that stopped her in her tracks. It wasn't from a reporter. It wasn't from the palace. It was from Catherine. 3 short sentences, polite but pointed. "I hope you'll think before you speak. Some bridges aren't worth burning." It wasn't a threat, but it felt like one. And Meghan, reading those words, smiled faintly. Not with warmth, but with resolve. "Then let it burn," she whispered. And that was the moment the war between the Waleses and the Sussexes turned from cold diplomacy to open conflict. Because what Meghan did next wouldn't just shake the palace. It would ignite a media firestorm unlike anything the royals had ever faced. She wasn't done being silenced. She was just getting started. It dropped without warning. No press leaks. No official previews. No orchestrated sources close to Meghan softening the ground. Just a sudden ping on millions of phones across the world. A push notification from every major news outlet. Breaking, Meghan Markle releases emotional statement responding to Prince William's royal decision. And within seconds, the internet detonated. No one had expected it that soon. Not the palace, not the press, not even Harry's old military friends who thought the couple might lie low. But Meghan wasn't interested in lying low. She'd been quiet long enough. The statement began simply. Almost too simply, with words that felt calm but were loaded with quiet fury. There are moments when silence becomes complicity, when truth is ignored, and people mistake cruelty for duty. That opening line hit like thunder. It wasn't a royal press release. It wasn't the polite, rehearsed tone of a duchess trying to sound diplomatic. It was raw, poetic, and deliberate, the kind of sentence that belongs in history books or courtrooms. And as readers scrolled, It became clear that Meghan had decided not to play defense. She was on offense. I entered this family believing in service, in unity, in loyalty. I believed the words I was told, that duty and love could coexist. I now see that, for some, love has conditions. Every phrase was surgical. No names, but everyone knew who she was talking about. The media didn't even have to speculate. The tone said it all. This was aimed squarely at Prince William. And she didn't stop there. To be stripped of what was once shared freely is painful, yes. But what hurts most is knowing that the same hand that once held ours in welcome now signs our erasure. You could practically hear the collective gasp. It was Shakespearean in its emotional drama, betrayal, family, love turned into duty's casualty. But Meghan wasn't just venting. She was crafting a narrative. She was reframing history before the palace could write it for her. Reporters scrambled to verify the statement's authenticity. Within minutes, her spokesperson confirmed it was genuine, written by Meghan herself, reviewed only by her attorney. Social media lit up like a wildfire. Hashtags like #StandWithMeghan and #RoyalReckoning began trending globally. Celebrities chimed in, influencers reposted it, and talk show hosts interrupted broadcasts to read excerpts live on air. Even veteran royal correspondents, hardened by decades of palace scandals, were stunned. "We haven't seen a response this direct since Diana's Panorama interview," one said on BBC News. And they weren't wrong. Because that's exactly what it felt like, a modern echo of Diana sitting before the cameras, speaking truths the palace wished would stay buried. But what made Meghan's statement even more powerful was its restraint. She didn't name names, didn't sling insults, didn't rant. She simply held up a mirror. And the reflection wasn't flattering. "True royalty," she wrote, "is not measured by titles, but by how one treats those they claim to love." That line would be quoted for weeks. It was subtle, elegant, deadly, and it worked. By the end of the first hour, the palace's media team was in meltdown mode. Phones buzzed nonstop inside Kensington and Buckingham Palace. Reporters camped outside the gates, shouting questions into the wind. Will Prince William respond? Has the king been briefed? Does this mark the end of reconciliation? No answers came. The official palace spokesperson offered a single line to the press: "We will not be commenting on private family matters." But inside, the silence was chaos. Advisors were split. Some wanted to release a counter-statement immediately, calling Meghan's comments misleading. Others warned that any direct response would only escalate the war. William, for his part, reportedly refused to say a word. He just stood at the window, one aide said. He read the statement twice, then said quietly, "She's good. Very good." It wasn't admiration. It was acknowledgement of a formidable opponent. Because Meghan's timing was impeccable, the statement dropped on the eve of a major royal event, one where William was scheduled to speak about unity and service. Suddenly, every journalist attending that event wanted to talk about anything but unity. In one move, Meghan had hijacked the royal narrative. Back in Montecito, Meghan wasn't watching the chaos on TV. She didn't have to. She knew exactly what she'd done. According to a close friend, she spent the day quietly with Archie and Lilibet, baking, reading stories, pretending it was a normal day. But her phone never stopped vibrating. Messages of support poured in from across the world: activists, celebrities, even former palace staffers who privately agreed with her. Harry, meanwhile, was a wreck. He admired her courage, yes, but he also understood what was coming next. He'd grown up in this world. He knew the palace wouldn't stay silent for long. He told her, "You've just declared war." Her reply? Calm. Certain. Then let it be war. And she meant it. Because Meghan wasn't fighting for titles anymore. She was fighting for her name, her family, her truth. But the statement didn't just send shockwaves through London. It split the world in half. Royal loyalists accused her of undermining the monarchy, of exploiting her platform for sympathy. "She's playing Diana 2.0, one columnist sneered. Except this time, it's about profit, not principle. Supporters, on the other hand, saw her as fearless, a woman who dared to speak where others stayed silent. "She's doing what the late princess never could," one headline read. "She's refusing to be silenced by the crown." And while the media argued, the palace seethed. Behind the walls of Kensington, William's team drafted multiple versions of potential responses, some conciliatory, others defensive. But William reportedly rejected them all. "No," he said firmly. "We don't respond to attacks. We uphold dignity." But dignity came with a price. Because by refusing to engage, William left a vacuum, and Meghan filled it. Every hour that passed without a royal rebuttal made her look more composed, more powerful, more human. Even inside the royal household, staffers began whispering that perhaps Meghan had a point. "The monarchy looks cruel when it's silent," one aide confessed off the record. "And right now, she's the only one speaking." That's when King Charles reportedly intervened. According to sources close to Clarence's house, the king summoned a private meeting the next morning. Those present described him as tired but firm. He reminded everyone that the institution must survive storms, not chase them. Translation: don't take the bait. But as always in royal history, silence breeds speculation. And speculation, this time, led to something far worse: leaks. Because within days, someone inside the palace leaked details of a private conversation between William and his father. According to the leaked transcript, Charles had told William, "You did what you thought was right." But hearts aren't led by duty. They're led by pain. That one quote sent tabloids into overdrive. The king's subtle criticism of his son, the implicit defense of Harry, it was enough to fuel another week of headlines. And just when the story seemed to reach its peak, something unexpected happened. Meghan appeared in public. It wasn't a red carpet or a glitzy interview. It was quiet, a charity visit to a local women's shelter in Santa Barbara. Cameras were there, of course, and when reporters shouted questions about her statement, she simply smiled and said, "I stand by every word." 7 words. Calm, controlled, devastating. Royal commentators called it the most calculated silence in modern media. Because with that one line, Meghan positioned herself as dignified, compassionate, unshaken, the opposite of the image her critics had painted. And back in London, William was livid. He reportedly slammed a folder shut during a briefing, saying, "She's playing this perfectly. Every time we stay silent, she wins." But his advisors warned him again. If you react, you legitimize her narrative. It was a lose-lose game, and Meghan knew it. Because this wasn't just about a statement. It was about shaping history. She was no longer the outsider fighting for inclusion. She was the woman exposing the system from the outside, in full control of her story. And yet, beneath the calm surface, another storm was brewing. Not from Meghan's words this time, but from inside the palace itself. Because while William battled media perception and Charles battled public sympathy, someone within the royal staff was about to break the one rule that holds the monarchy together: loyalty. And when that person spoke, they wouldn't just confirm Meghan's claims. They would reveal something far more explosive. Something that would expose the hidden hand behind William's decision. And when the truth came out, even the king would be left speechless. The world thought Prince William had acted alone. A decisive, impulsive future king cutting ties with his brother in a moment of steely independence. That was the story every headline told. But behind the palace gates, the truth was more complicated and far more chilling. Because as the ink dried on William's royal order, another hand had quietly guided that pen. King Charles had known. He hadn't just known, he'd agreed. Silently, secretly, completely. The revelation came from within. According to insiders close to Clarence's house, the king had been briefed days before the order was signed. The documents had been sent to him in a secured diplomatic pouch marked "Family Affairs." He had read them carefully, line by line, late one night in his private study at Balmoral, as rain battered the old castle windows. And when his private secretary asked whether he wanted to intervene, Charles simply said, "No, let him proceed." Those 4 words changed everything. You might wonder, why would a father allow one son to erase the other from royal life? How could a man who endured a lifetime of fractured family ties endorse another one? The answer, according to a longtime royal insider, is that Charles was tired of drama, tired of headlines, tired of being the monarch who reigned under constant emotional siege. The king has always been haunted by Diana's ghost, by the perception that he failed as both a husband and a father, the insider said. But he's reached a point where survival of the institution matters more than redemption of the family. And in that twisted calculus, Harry had become expendable. For years, Charles had walked a tightrope between love and image. balancing public empathy for Harry with the growing resentment of the royal machine. Harry's interviews, his memoir, his criticisms of Camilla, each one chipped away at the king's patience. But the final straw, according to Palace Whispers, came months earlier when Harry reportedly rejected an invitation to attend a private family meeting following Charles's health diagnosis. He said he didn't want to be used for sympathy optics, one source said. That broke his father's heart and his trust. So when William came forward with his plan to finalize the royal separation once and for all, Charles didn't resist. He didn't celebrate either. He simply allowed it. It was classic Charles. Indirect, cautious, but quietly complicit. He's never been a man of confrontation, said a former royal aide. His way of saying yes is to say nothing at all. And so, as William took the public heat for the decision, Charles stayed in the shadows, issuing no statement, granting no interviews, maintaining the image of a father caught between two sons. But behind that image was calculation. Royal insiders say the king's approval was part of a broader strategy, one aimed at securing the monarchy's stability during his fragile health and ensuring a seamless transition to William's reign. Harry and Meghan, he was told by advisors, had become unpredictable, uncontrollable, and potentially damaging to future relations with the Commonwealth and Parliament. One particularly revealing memo, reportedly drafted by a senior courtier, described the Sussex situation as a lingering wound requiring surgical closure. Cold, precise, bureaucratic. And Charles, ever the man who prefers the quiet stroke of a pen to the drama of confrontation, agreed to let his heir wield the scalpel. But make no mistake, this wasn't just royal politics. It was personal. Those close to Charles say he had grown weary of what he perceived as Harry's public attacks on Camilla. In interviews, Harry had accused the Queen Consort of planting stories and playing the long game. Those accusations, aides say, cut deeper than any others. Charles will forgive many things, one courtier explained, but he will not forgive humiliation of the woman he loves. And so, as much as this was about protecting the monarchy, it was also about protecting Camilla, the queen he waited a lifetime to marry. In that sense, William's move served a dual purpose: institutional control and personal vindication. It was the kind of quiet retribution Charles excelled at, subtle, polite, devastating. But while the king's approval was strategic, it wasn't without guilt. The night after the order was signed, Charles reportedly couldn't sleep. He was seen pacing his private quarters, a half-empty glass of scotch in hand, muttering something under his breath. One servant claimed to have heard him say, "History repeats itself, always repeats itself." The echo of his own past was impossible to ignore. The father who had been cold and distant. The husband who had chosen duty over love. The man who watched his family fracture in front of the cameras and called it destiny. And now, decades later, he was watching the same story unfold. Only this time, it was his sons playing the roles he once knew too well. Some inside the palace believed Charles's silence was his way of washing his hands of the entire affair. He's given up trying to fix them, one insider said. He's decided it's better to protect the crown and let the next generation carry the burden. But there was one person who didn't agree with that approach, Princess Anne. According to multiple reports, and confronted her brother in a private conversation days after the news broke. "You're the king, not a spectator," she told him bluntly. "You can't sit back and let this family tear itself apart." Charles reportedly replied, "Sometimes being king means knowing when to say nothing," and wasn't impressed. "And sometimes," she shot back, "it means having the courage to say something." The argument ended there, but the tension between them didn't, and has long been known as the family's moral compass. The one who speaks her mind even when others remain silent. Her disapproval, though never made public, became one of the palace's worst-kept secrets. But the king stayed silent, refusing to intervene publicly even as the headlines grew louder. It was a silence that spoke volumes. Because while the world debated whether William's decision was heartless or heroic, those in the know understood that the order had been ghost-signed by a father trying to keep his crown clean while letting his heir carry the blame. And for William, that meant bearing the burden of a choice that wasn't entirely his. One aide close to the prince described his demeanor in the days following as withdrawn but resolute. "He never once mentioned his father," the aide said. "But you could tell he knew this wasn't just his doing. It was the king's will carried out through his hand. Meanwhile, Harry was piecing the truth together from across the ocean. It started with a call from a former palace ally, someone who had quietly sympathized with him after the fallout. "You're blaming the wrong man," the voice on the other end said. William signed it yes. But Charles didn't stop him. Harry reportedly went silent for a full 30 seconds before whispering. He knew. He knew, the voice said. He approved it. According to sources close to the Sussexes, Harry was crushed beyond words. The betrayal by his brother had already gutted him. But learning that his father had stood by and let it happen was like losing both parents all over again. He reportedly said, "First they took my mother's peace, now they've taken mine." That quote, leaked weeks later by a confidant, would reignite the public's fury. The image of a father quietly sanctioning his son's exile was too haunting to ignore. And while the palace doubled down on its no-comment stance, insiders began to notice subtle changes in Charles's behavior.